created to show Europeans the diversity of the people here. These 16 images are a sort of an anthropological cookbook, showing the results of mixing the genes of black people, brown people, and white people.
What about me? Which one in the 16?
You will be here, look.
Let me see.
This one, a mulatto. The little kid, that's the mulatto.
The beautiful brown baby like me.
Yes, of course.
What would Barack Obama be?
Also a mulatto.
Okay, Beyonce, she would be mulatto?
Yes.
What would Tiger Woods be?
A lobo with African descent blood and also indigenous blood.
These people were crazy.
Yes, they need pseudo-scientific reasons to explain why some cultures will be inferior, and you have to make them slaves.
And they found it.
They found it.
16 shades of blackness.
Yes.
But why were your white people more willing to sleep with black people than my white people?
Quite well, because the culture of the Spanish church allowed the marriage between all the ethnic groups. And also the Spanish people have an heritage more open to the mixture because of the Arabic presence in Spain.
The Moors were in Spain for 800 years or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was kind of easy to have these mixtures. And I think that's a different story from the United States.
By 1810, boldened by the American Revolution and the French Revolution, Mexicans sought their own independence, but it would take time.
So the War of Independence, 1810, 1821.
Yes, it was a very long war.
The revolution was started by a priest named Father Hidalgo. He called for the abolition of all castes, saying Indians, mulattoes, and other castes all will be known as Americans. After he was killed, his cause was taken up in succession by two generals, a priest named Jose Maria Morelos and Vicente Guerrero.
In fact, both were Afro-descendants.
Wait a minute. Two black people were generals in the War of Independence.
Yes.
So this is like George Washington being black.
Yes.
For Americans.
Yes, yes.
That's astonishing.
Yes.
After Morelos was killed by the Spanish in 1815, the Negro Guerrero, as his enemies mockingly called him, saw the war to its conclusion with the help of many black Mexicans. In one story, Guerrero's father beseeched him to surrender to the Spanish. In front of his men, he answered, "You are my father, but the country comes first." La patria es primero is now a famous phrase throughout Mexico.
Yes, and in fact, in 1830, Guerrero stopped slavery by writing the law in the Constitution.
33 years before Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yes. Also, an important thing about Guerrero is that he was the second president in Mexico.
So you had your Barack Obama in 1830.
That's right.
So once again, Mexico is the head of the United States.
Yes, of course.
That's amazing.
Imagine if George Washington and John Adams had been African Americans. Would we have needed a civil rights movement? When Guerrero, who was a mulatto, abolished slavery, he also eliminated racial categories from birth, marriage, and death certificates. Today, there are states and towns all over Mexico named after Morelos and Guerrero. Morelos is even on the 50-peso bill. But many Mexicans don't even know that they were black men, or that they owe their independence to these two men of visible African descent. After almost a century of denying its multicultural and multiracial roots and an official policy of whitening, Mexico began to embrace a new national identity. In 1925, the philosopher Jose Vasconcelos published an electrifying essay called The Cosmic Race, arguing that Mexico's mixed-race heritage made it superior and unique. Almost overnight, Mexico's mestizaje culture became a popular brown pride movement. But if everyone was brown now, what had happened to Mexico's black roots? The blackest part of Mexico today is called the Costa Chica. It's on the Pacific coast, on the opposite side of the country from Veracruz. South of Acapulco and north of Puerto Escondido, the land is swampy and the towns are extremely poor. The Costa Chica has remained Mexico's blackest region for centuries because it was so isolated. There wasn't even a highway to get here until the 1950s. Born in Trinidad, Father Glenn Jamat has been ministering to congregations in the Costa Chica for the past 25 years. Part of Father Glenn's mission has been to raise black consciousness, even founding an annual conference of black towns. I wanted to learn from him how the Mexicans who can't pass as brown or cosmic relate to their blackness and their heritage of slavery.
The first occasion when I said a mass, a grown man came and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I am the priest." And for about 10 minutes, he went on, "You're not a priest. You couldn't be a priest. I've never seen a black priest. We black people only work the land. We load trucks and whatever.
You can't be the head man."
Exactly. And he was really talking about himself. Everything is against an African Mexican seeing himself as someone who can lift his head and take his place in Mexican society as an equal.
A racial controversy in 2005 brought Mexico unwanted international attention. The Mexican government issued a commemorative stamp featuring the popular black cartoon character Memín Pinguín. Most Mexicans love this character, but African Americans were incensed, calling it a racist throwback. Jesse Jackson even flew to Mexico City to complain about it personally to President Vicente Fox. The stamp became an instant collector's item, and the comic book was reissued from its first printing. The government never apologized and has never recalled the stamp.
Memín Penguin. I mean, if you're sitting in Boston, you look at it, looks like Sambo.
Mexicans who are very intelligent people, their reaction was, you cannot judge him by racist standards of the end of the century because it was based on the 1940s. So there's nothing wrong about Memín Pinguín. You sort of pinch yourself to say, well, is something wrong with me?
Free your mind, brother.
And you see the extent to which people have really bought into a system which is biased.
Do you think, in your experience, they'll have a Barack Obama in this generation?
I don't think so. There's so much that has to be done before black Mexicans have access to education, political participation, social acceptance, and these things must be in place before you begin to produce leaders. I would also say that I have seen changes there. I now hear young people saying in a more assertive fashion, soy negro.
Why?
It is because of the kind of visibility we've been able to generate and all the things that have spun off from that.
This place looks like Harlem to me. This looks like Africa, Mexico. It does, it's great.
But we speak Spanish, but we believe in the resurrected Christ. I mean, the Spanish culture, the European culture is also in us. And because of that, it's difficult to say we are only blacks. What are we? A mix? A mix, a mix.
Let's go. Eduardo Zapata is a journalist, a native Costa Chican, and an example of the new generation Father Glenn mentioned, a generation proud of their black identity. What have these people gathered to celebrate?
That one of them was ordained a priest. He makes many of the people here feel proud. The Toro de Petate is danced throughout all of America, from Argentina to Mexico.
The Toro de Petate dance celebrates the bull, which is part of most Latin American cultures. But when it's danced in Afro-Latino communities, the bull has a special significance. His valor becomes a metaphor for freedom from slavery. Spirit. Eduardo,
Are you described as a black person, a Negro here in Mexico?
Claro.
Of course. When you're little, nobody questions it. When you live here, when you go to Mexico City to study, you go to Acapulco, you go to the US, you realize you're different. That you're a Mexican, but you have something that's not the same as all Mexicans. You discover that you're black.
Do black people suffer discrimination here in Mexico?
Yes, we are a racist society. If you're in the cities, they stop you, ask you for your ID card, they make you sing the national anthem. And they could accuse you of coming from Cuba to destabilize things or something like that. It isn't said, but in every Mexican family there is a black person. And do you know what the city folks say? They say he was born black, but we love him anyway.
Tell me about Memin Penguin.
Do you think it's racist or not?
No.
No.
Okay.
No, you go out into the street and ask people and they're not worried. It's just a character. They don't identify with him. He's still just in stories. It's kind of like laughing at yourself if you take it with humor and with sarcasm.
Why did Jesse Jackson come here to see Vicente Fox?
Jesse Jackson should have worried about all the blacks that go to work there and aren't treated like people. They're treated like third-class people. Because he's not interested in black people who are living. He's interested in Memin Penguin. Politics.
Política.
Y por negro me desprecias, yo no niego mi color, que entre perlas y diamantes el moreno es el mejor. En la noche me cobijo la sombra de mi color, no me importa lo que griten, este hombre trae sabor. En mis venas.
Israel Reyes, a teacher in the Costa Chican town of Cuaque, is waging a campaign to promote Afro-Mexican pride. He hosts the radio show Cimarron, the voice of the Afro-Mestizos, which broadcasts bi-weekly throughout the Costa Chica. He's trying to force the country to recognize the rights of its black citizens.
The first step is being included in the census, to make it known that there are black people in Mexico. And those black people didn't get stuck in colonial times. And they aren't just in history books, in the times of slavery. Blacks are here now, right now, today. And they are demanding that their rights be recognized.
Mm-hmm. Do you think your effort will be successful to change the census?
We started a process in which we had talks with government authorities. At the last minute, they informed us that it's not possible to include a question on the census, but we are pushing forward a pilot census for the black population in Mexico.
Oh, that's good. How will it benefit the black community if they can say Afro, Blanco, Indigenous?
The benefits would be public policies for these populations, better living conditions, education, health, housing, access to federal programs. If we don't start, we will never know how many blacks there are in Mexico.
Good luck. I think it's very, very important.
We are being visited today by a very well-known professor, Professor Gates. Professor, what do you hope the results of your work in the Costa Chica will be?
I hope that it makes Americans more aware of Mexico's complex racial past. Mexico's black past didn't just disappear. It's still here, and in two forms. It's an essential part of the history, culture, and DNA of the country. But for some, it's written on their faces. The visible remnant of all that didn't melt in the mestizo melting pot that we call Mexico. Mexico is a victim of its own success. It had a noble idea. It abolished slavery in 1830, 33 years before the United States did. But it had a romantic idea that if it eliminated racial categories, it would eliminate racism. But that was really a form of racism itself. You can't be great if you try to suppress a huge aspect of your history and a huge part of the identity of your people. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck.